some lessons don't come from books. They come from bruises. They come from life.
There is no substitute for experience, period.
Some of the biggest successes were a byproduct of failure.
If you want to learn, build, and grow,
Why not learn from somebody who's already paid the price for success?
the wisdom is in the gray.
This is The Greybeard Show.
Greybeard Show. Learn,
Build.
grow.
And welcome to the show. This is The Greybeard Show, and you can probably guess my name is Greybeard, otherwise known as Sean Davis, but I go by Greybeard, and you're along with me as I'm talking about empowering yourself to become a better, richer version of yourself. I'm a mentor, I'm a coach, and today's show, I'm going to be talking about the seductive nature of success. I bet there's a whole bunch of folks out in radio land that had no idea that success can be seductive. But if you're not careful, oh man, it can destroy you every bit as much as failure can. In fact, I would argue that the seductiveness of success is even more destructive than failure is. Because you obviously have more to lose. You've got more on the line. When your back's against the wall and you've got nothing and you failed, man, the only way you can go is up. But man, when you're all the way up, the only way you can go is either further up or down. And so a little backstory. The reason I'm talking about this is, in my history, in my career, I've reached, attained, and had some success in my life. I've had 7-figure success in financial services. I had it in flipping houses, and then I've had it in a solar energy company that I manage. And it's taught me a lot. I think my failures have taught me more than my successes have. But I will tell you, the most dangerous thing I ever encountered in all of my business life was ignoring how seductive success can be. And so let me give you a little bit of a backstory. So, in my career, I spent 22 years as a fiduciary financial advisor. But even before that, initially I started my professional working life in a sales position. I was selling Hondas at a company called Carmichael Honda in Sacramento. And I spent about 5 years in that career and then found my way into financial services working with a company called New York Life. And traditionally, I was selling basically investments, initially selling life insurance. And I will tell you this, selling anything that's tangible, anything that you can touch, anything that you can smell, experience, feel, that's way easier than selling people death insurance or life insurance, however you want to look at it. But, for me, that was a difficult road. And initially, when you're first in a career like life insurance, 100% commission based, you eat what you kill. And so every day was a grind. Nobody paid any salary or anything like that. So you can imagine feast and famine. It was this cyclical nature of the business. And I experienced that for years and years. And it was a challenge. Anybody that's in sales and 100% commission based can tell you that it's not an easy position to be in. But if you can excel, if you can get there, if you can make a living at it, then sometimes it's the most wonderful place you can be, because you're often paid a lot more for your time and your efforts than what you would be in many other educated jobs, let's say. So that's why a lot of people do end up in sales, and that was what happened to me. I started a family young, ended up marrying my high school sweetheart, and we've been together for 31 years now, married, been together for 36 years from the point we started dating, and we got 4 boys. And so early on in my financial services career, I had a house, I had 2 car payments, so you got a mortgage, 2 car payments, had a wife, 2 kids, and it was all about, for us, her staying home to watch the kids and raise the kids. We did not want them to be raised in daycare or raised by a nanny, and so that was a conscious effort to have my wife stay home with our 4 boys. And so, the pressure that I felt early on in my career was immense, right? So have to make the mortgage payment, have to make the car payments, have to provide the food. I'm the sole income earner. I got, 4 mouths to feed, including my own. And I'm in a 100% sales oriented career, and that's not for the faint of heart. So I always felt this immense pressure to perform and to see results and to make a living. And my first 6 months in financial services were horrendous. I think I made 1/5 what I had been making in the same time period the year previous in the car business. And so, it was not easy. Let's just put it to you that way. It was a grind. And over time, though, in a cyclical nature of being in financial services and being in a commission-based environment, selling products, selling annuities, selling life insurance, selling investments, mutual funds, things like that, you always had to find the next person to talk to, and that was very difficult to do. And so, I felt like my income was on this never-ending roller coaster of like fear, and then you got a little bit of money, and now do I have a chance to even relax? And then maybe I relax a little bit. Now I got to build the pipeline, and then just on and on and on. And so, again, feast, famine. Many of you out there in Radio Land may know what I'm exactly talking about. And so, what was transformative for me, over time, because I got into the financial services industry in 1997, and it wasn't until really 2009 that things started to change for me. And so going back to 2009, for those of you that remember what was happening in 2009, it was like this calamitous fall of everything. The Great Recession began. That's where housing plummeted. And at the time, I certainly wasn't immune to the effects of the national carnage financially in terms of people losing their houses and going bankrupt. That was the year GM went bankrupt. And so when you're dealing with investments in financial services and the stock market loses 50% of its value, at that particular time, we were saying the 401k turned into a 201k in those years. So a lot of people did not want to make a move. They didn't want to change anything. It was like Chicken Little, the sky's falling, right? So just to kind of frame it, it was a very, very difficult year to convince people that what you had to offer was different or meaningfully different, when it felt like every place everyone looked, everything was falling and everything was plummeting in value, right? So that was the year that almost broke me after 12 years of being in the financial services business. So all of this is leading up to say that for those first 10, 12 years in business, even though I had, some decent years and some good income in those years, I never really felt like I had tasted success. All I had really felt like I had tasted was reprieve, and then burden, then a little bit of a reprieve. I felt like I was in the ocean, right? Like the waves are crashing over my head. I can't breathe. And then all of a sudden, I'd have a decent month, and okay, I can take a breath here, because again, all of it was really kind of falling on my shoulders. And somebody out there in Radio Land can definitely relate. So all of this led me to a pretty transformative opportunity, and it began with radio. Incidentally, that's how I found my voice, and why you're actually listening to me right now. So in financial services in 2009, I was approached by somebody that knew somebody that I was in an office building with. And anyway, this particular person had come to me and said, do you want to consider investing in radio or using radio to market your services? And it was perfect timing, because there was something in my spirit that was kind of festering for me, which was, how do I change this? I mean, do I get out of this business? Because I'd had my fill. People weren't wanting to invest money, and I felt like everything that we were doing was stagnating, and I felt like I couldn't catch a break. And I was kind of down to my last pennies at that particular juncture, and trying to decide whether I was going to stay in the business or figure out something to do. And I was even contemplating potentially going back into the car business. And so anyway, I thought about doing this whole radio thing. I thought maybe radio would be key. And so this particular person talked me into doing some commercials on radio, and I was super excited. And I was going to do 70 commercials, 70 1-minute commercials. And I was going to convey the differences in what I felt I had to offer versus what other people had to offer. And I'm gonna I've got a voice here, and let me see if I can't get somebody to call us up. So I record these 70 commercials that I'm going to do, and my wife and I, and we had our kids in the office at the time, and we're waiting for the first commercial to air, and we're airing the station. It was on KFBK. And I remember the first commercial airs, and all of a sudden it's airing. Oh, there's my voice. Oh, I can hear myself on the radio. Whoa, this is kind of weird. And then I'm waiting for the phone to ring. I'm waiting for the phone to ring because we offered a number. We had a good commercial. It was a good, I don't remember what I said, but it was good. I can promise you that it was good. And then I'm waiting for the phone to ring. And guess what? The phone didn't ring. Oh, man. Well, maybe the next commercial. And so we're waiting later in the day. We hear another commercial. And, well, unfortunately, the phone didn't ring on that one. But, again, we had 68 others that were going to air throughout the next 2 weeks that we were doing these. And so at the time, this particular venture into radio cost me, I want to say it was like 10 grand to do 70 commercials aired over 2-3 weeks. And that might as well have been $1 million to me at the time because it was effectively all the money that I had because everything was melting down. Nobody was investing. And I'm just taking a long shot here, right, to do this whole radio thing. And so here's what happened. Over the course of 3 weeks, all 70 commercials aired. Okay. And guess how many calls we got? I'll give you a hint. It's a round number. It's really round. It's a very round number. We ended up getting 0 calls to the show. So it's like taking $10,000 and just gone into the ether, into the air. Nothing happened, right? And so the radio folks said, "Hey, now listen, you can't, you don't quit now. This is about consistency. It's about being predictable. The first time somebody hears your voice, that doesn't mean that they're going to respond. You got to continue at it." And I'm like, "Listen, I don't think you understand. That was the last 10 grand I had. I don't have $10,000 more to throw at this to see if something different happens." And so that was effectively the end of my radio experience and almost the end of my financial services career, all in one fell swoop. But something kept festering with me. And it was this idea that I couldn't let radio go. And there were a couple of guys in Sacramento that I didn't necessarily agree with that were on the radio, and I was probably spurned by my resistance to their messaging and what they were saying. And so anyway, it was one of those things, if you feel me, if you hear me when I say this, it's one of those things that was persistent at bothering me. It wasn't like I was searching it out. It wasn't like I was consciously thinking, "Oh, let me think about radio again." It would pop into my head, and it was persistent. I should do something with radio. Maybe I should do something different. Maybe I didn't have enough time. Maybe 1 minute isn't enough time. Maybe I need to do a show. Maybe I need to have my own show. Like those types of thoughts percolating in my head. And so, the whole radio show experience initially was much like a used car sale transaction. The first person I talked to, came out, sold me the stuff. She had her manager. I almost declined the meeting. She had her manager come out. I felt like it was like the salesperson bringing their sales manager in to strong arm you if you're going to buy the car or not, kind of thing. And I almost declined the meeting. I'm certainly glad I didn't. But her manager came out. I had a great connection with him and both of them. And so I reached back out to him about 6 months after my initial 10 grand evaporated into ether, and reached back out to this gentleman and said, "Hey, listen, I haven't been able to forget radio. It's still bothering me. I feel like I should be just doing something else. And I'm thinking maybe I should do one of those weekend radio shows because, if you talk in 1 minute, like if you talk in a minute, you can say whatever you want in a minute. You can be as compelling as you want in a minute, but you only have a minute. It's a minute. People don't really have the time to differentiate you from someone else. You can't say it faster. You can't say it, you can't have tremendously more words. There's no real big angle. It's a minute. You just can't properly convey what you need to convey in 1 minute. And especially for me at the time, because at that juncture, I was really heavily involved in a lot of different investments that weren't traditional investments. I felt like I really had an angle. I had a differentiation. I could do some things that Schwab guys couldn't do. I could do some things that Fidelity guys couldn't do. And I felt like in 1 minute I can say, hey, I'm different. I'm different than Schwab. I'm different than your Fidelity guy. But, you don't really have the chance to properly convey those differences. So I reached back out to this sales manager and I said, hey, listen, I'd like to take another crack at this, but I think what I should be doing is a radio show, maybe a 1 hour long radio show. And he says, well, funny thing that you're calling. Just 3 days ago, we had another spot open up, and I've already got a guy taking every other week, and you could take the every other week, alternate between the two. And so I thought that was a perfect opportunity for me to test my theory. Was I right? Would more time make a difference? And I promise you, this whole story is leading to the seductiveness of success. Okay, I promise you. You just got to stick with me for a moment. So we decide to fire up the mic. I go down to the radio station, and it's like March of 2009. That was the precise month that the stock market had finally plummeted 50% and finally come back up, because in October of 2008, that's when it started to decline. It culminated in a March low point for the market. The Great Recession was in full steam, and I decided to spend more money launching a radio show. And the advantage of the radio show was it wasn't 10 grand up front. It was only like $1,500 a weekend or whatever it was. So they go, okay, when I show up to the station, this is the training that I got. They said, okay, here's the mic, right? Here's the mic. That red button, when it's on, that means you're live. Okay, and make sure you got enough to talk about, because on a radio show, it's really awkward if you're silent and you don't have anything to say. So just make sure you know how to talk. There you go. We're going live in 5 minutes. So that was the sole amount of training I had. Good thing I'm a talker, because I didn't end up with any dead air. But so anyway, I do this show and I talk about all the differentiation, and I'm very educational. And, the whole time I'm doing the show, and I say, if you want to call, I even gave out the station's number. I said, if you want to call, call this number and get in touch. And crickets, nothing. Oh, well, that's the first show. I remember what the other folks had told me. You got to stay consistent at it, right? So the next 2 weeks later, we had an opportunity to redo it again, and I do another show, and I think we got one call. And then a couple of weeks later, we did another show, no calls. And then a couple of weeks later, did another show, 2 calls. And it went on like that for like another 3 months. So just to catch you up to speed, okay, make a decision to do radio with commercials, spent 10 grand, got no response. Make a decision to do a radio show, 1 hour long show, and doing the shows, and it's costing me like $1,500 to do that, $3 grand a month to do that, and I'm doing it for 3 months. I'm in it another 9 grand, and literally nothing. No business, no appointments, no nothing out of it. And so once again, I was contemplating quitting. I was contemplating, and secret lesson here, okay, success-wise. It literally, my experience has been in my life, it's always darkest right before the dawn. Another way to say it is the valley always prophesies the mountain, okay? What I mean by that is when you're in the most desperate despair position you've been in business, I find that's when I'm closest to leveling up. The next iteration, the change, man. It's like you're being tested. Can you withstand it? Can you stick in? Can you stay? Can you persevere? Perseverance is an incredibly important ingredient to success. You got to be able to persevere. So anyway, now I'm 19 grand into this radio venture, no clients out of it, and I'm thinking I'm crazy. And my wife posts on Facebook that we are about to do another show. I'm heading into July 4th weekend of 2009, and she got a reach out from an old high school friend or acquaintance that she had, and this particular gentleman did a radio show down in L.A., and he said, I've been doing radio for years. I'll listen to Sean's show, and, let's see if we can't figure out, I might be able to help him, because I made a lot of mistakes. And so this was a couple of weeks prior to the July 4th launch. So this gentleman and I converse, and he said to me, "You're very professorial on your show. You're You're basically a great educator, but there's no real call to action. Okay, there's no impetus for somebody to respond to you. Okay, like you're educational, but there's no reason for somebody to contact you per se. Is what he was trying to get at. Whereas he had like pamphlets or summaries or a white paper or some special report, and he would use that to get somebody to respond. And so he said, I think you would do well if you gave out something, if you had some piece of literature that you made available to folks when you gave them your number, that if they call, they could get. And I thought, well, let's give it a try. So heading into the 4th of July weekend, 2009, I took a friend with me. We go down to the radio station, and I'm in a sour mood because I had really, really decided that if I didn't get 2 or 3 calls out of this radio show or more, I was done. I was gonna quit radio. I probably would end up quitting the financial services business because I just didn't like the grind, the feast or famine, the ebb and flow, the inconsistency of income. I just felt like I'm just going to, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I got to do something that's more consistent than this. So my friend and I show up at the station, 4th of July weekend. They don't even staff the station with a call screener. There's nobody there, just us. And it's the first time I'm gonna do a show, and I'm gonna provide some literature, some piece of information for somebody to get. And I was talking about Nouriel Roubini. So I was in financial services. So I was talking about Dr. Doom, he's known as. And again, this is when the market had plummeted already 50%. And this guy was speculating it could go, another 20, 30% beyond that. And he had some reasons why. And so on this particular show, I talked about the market, and I talked about this resource. And I went into the first commercial break saying, hey, listen, if you want to get this resource from Dr. Doom, Nouriel Roubini, he thinks it's going to, things are going to get worse before they get better, call this number. And we head into break. And so for those of you that aren't in radio, there's about an 8-second delay. Okay. So here's this 8-second delay between my audio when it comes out of my mouth and when you would hear it in your car. And that's to obviously protect against, lots of different things that could happen, vulgarity on the radio, stuff like that. So they can beep that stuff out or emergency situations or whatever. So first break comes, about 8 seconds later, this friend of mine, Jay, we're sitting in the studio there, and all of a sudden, bink, bink, bink. There's like 3 lights start flashing on the phone. Okay, 3 lights. And I was like, Jay, listen, go grab the phone. People are calling. So the first commercial break, I hadn't gotten 3 calls in a show before, in a whole show. And this was the first break at like 10 minutes or whatever, into the show. And so he goes in and starts answering the phone and writing people's name down. And I go into the next grade. I got a little more pep in my step when I come out of commercial now and I'm talking to people. I said, hey, listen, now, if you want to get this information, here's what's going on. And my octave rose and my voice elevated, and I have a little bit more pep in the step, and go into the second commercial break. And now we're eagerly waiting for the phone lines, and bink, 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 here's 3 more or 4 more or whatever it was. And so long story short, we closed out that show, and I had 22 calls, to the show. And I'd never, ever, ever had anything close to that. I'd never had, in all of my time doing seminars and all this other stuff in financial services, I'd never had in a 1-hour opportunity, 22 people say, hey, yeah, I want to speak with you, or yes, give me that resource, or, can we talk, or whatever. So as you can imagine, super transformative to my mindset. And all of my time in financial services, I had never had anything that was almost like a spigot, on your house that has water come out of it. Like you can open it up and it would just flow water, right? I felt like radio was giving me that, right? And so over time, very quickly, we learned the ins and outs of how to make that work in radio. That model of giving out some information, providing an opportunity for somebody to get educated, providing information on the show itself, that model really works. So coming out of the 4th of July weekend, we did it again the following weekend, different subjects. And, next thing you know, I got 25 calls. And then the following weekend, did it again, and next thing you know, I've got maybe 30 calls, and this was just so different than anything I had ever experienced prior to that. I never had that kind of consistency. Every weekend you go, I talk, my mouth is, an inch or two away from the microphone. And next thing you know, we got 20 leads or 15 leads, right? And so over time, here's what happened. And this is where some of the seductiveness of success comes in. Because if you're an entrepreneur, okay, or if you're an executive, or if you're somebody, small business owner, okay, and you have goals and you have dreams, when you start to see some fruit, some real positive fruit from that, it makes you want to step on the gas. It makes you want to accelerate. I always live life fast. I drive fast. I talk fast. I make decisions fast. I'm a pretty gut level guy. Like, I make decisions with my gut. I don't need to fixate a lot. Like, I've always worked that way. And so as soon as I saw something successful, as soon as I saw something perform, I wanted to do more of it. So what happened for me was we went from every other weekend. The first opportunity I had, I wanted to buy every weekend. So I wanted to be consistent. I wanted to be on the radio every single weekend versus the alternating that I had started with. And so first opportunity we had, we did that. And so from that, I saw more consistency, because they were right. The more consistent I was with my messaging, the more time I spent on the mic, the more chances I had to introduce myself to people that maybe hadn't heard the show. Because, just like right now, if you're hearing the show, maybe you just happened into it. Maybe you just by chance found it. Maybe you're just, hearing 7 minutes of it or whatever, but you need that consistency. And over time, I really developed a good following. I had a name for myself. And so what ended up happening is 1 hour, I ended up adding another hour to the station, right? And so just to keep you up to speed, especially in Sacramento area, radio is not inexpensive, and on the biggest AM radio station in the area, and one of the most prolific. I mean, Rush Limbaugh was born out of KFBK. Tom Sullivan was born out of KFBK. And so here I am, little, Greybeard now, but little Sean Davis out there on the radio talking about, financial stuff, and I'm starting to see decent lead flow. So I got another hour. So now, just to catch you up, right? $1,500 an hour. Now I got 2 hours. Now I'm doing $3,000 a weekend on radio. But it was performing, right? It was producing results. I could see opportunity out of it. It was worth the expense, because what we were driving in new business, new clients, new opportunities was far greater than that. So $3,000 a weekend. So that's $12,000 a month I'm spending on radio, right? That's $144,000 a year on radio, right? Now, in financial services, just to prevent you from, let's say, misstating facts or leading somebody to the wrong conclusion, all of my shows really at that particular juncture had to be screened. They had to be submitted in advance. I kind of had to have, initially it started out as an outline, and then what it became was a 16-page word-for-word script of what I was going to say on the radio, because just to protect somebody from being misleading or somehow stating false truths, or to make sure I didn't say the word quote unquote guarantee. I mean, all of this had to be vetted by, other companies that were managing me as a financial advisor. And by this time I'd gotten out of New York Life, and I was working on my own and working with, a lot of different, what we call alternative investments. And so long story short, over the next 2 or 3 years, I saw, the biggest rise in my personal income that I'd ever had exposure to. I mean, it was significant, but also the liabilities were significant as well. This all culminated over a 3-year period of time, almost 4-year period of time, where eventually I was on 5 different stations every single weekend. I had a call center answering my phone calls for me to try to help me book appointments, just because I didn't have enough bandwidth. We had to get a call center involved. And with the call center and the radio show advertising that I was doing, I was spending roughly somewhere between $450,000 and $500,000 a year on radio. Okay. Now, this is where the seductive part comes in, right? So again, when you taste a little success, whatever the ingredient mix was, Was it my voice? Was it the show? Was it the time? Was it the opportunity? Is it radio in general? Whatever your version of success is financially, whatever that is, okay? When you taste it, like the financial aspects of it, when you get a little bit of it, you want to recreate it. You want to recreate more of it, right? And so you chase more of it. And so what I ended up doing over time, just because I had to pre-script these shows and it was a massive amount, I ended up working 40 hours a week, then 50, then 60 hours a week. I used to, by the way, most people have Monday through Friday, they work and they have the weekends off. Well, guess what? My working was the weekends because that's when my radio shows would air. And then I would have to have appointments Monday through Friday. And I got to the point, okay, just because of the cost, again, the radio was not insignificant in cost. I get to the point where the cost is a significant burden with my staff, with radio and everything else. We're talking about, at one point, I think the most onerous expense I had was roughly about maybe 70, 75 grand a month that I was personally responsible for generating in order for everything to continue to work. And that was just break even. Staff, rent, all the business equipment, everything else I needed, plus, the cost of advertising and having a call center and all that stuff. And so the first thing I started to give up. So in life, my definition of success is now completely evolved. I don't think having a massive amount of money but being 500 pounds is my definition of success. But I started to sacrifice faith, started going to church less. I just didn't have the time. Started to sacrifice family, which, it's easy to sacrifice family. I hate to say that as a business owner or entrepreneur, if you've got the luxury of time, you think, okay, I'll just suck this up. I gotta write this show. I gotta do this. I gotta, meet this person. I gotta make this sacrifice. I had sacrificed fitness. I certainly sacrificed fun, because again, I could strike while the iron's hot. You got to reap what you sow. Here's the reaping season. Like this was great. I needed to focus on this, and this was wild. And so I sacrificed fun. And by the way, I didn't have much chance to hang out with friends. I was too busy. I'd head down, and the only thing I was doing was being really good at my job and really good at making money. But every other aspect of my life had significantly fallen off a cliff in terms of my time and attention. Okay. Now, in life, there's 7 areas that are kind of like spinning plates that you need to attend to in your life. Faith, and they all start with F's. Faith, family, fitness, fun, friends, field, which is your job, and finance. So faith, family, fitness, fun, friends, field, and finance. If you want to have a well-rounded life, if you want to have a well-cultured or curated life, you need to have time and energy spent in all 7 of those categories to some degree, and they'll ebb and flow. Then there's seasons. Sometimes seasons will take you out of balance to some degree, and you'll have a lot more time in one and a lot less time in another, and that's natural. That's all part of the process, okay? But for me, sacrificing faith, stopped going to church just because I was too dang busy. I'll get to it later. I'll watch it online. Those types of things, those happen. Started to sacrifice family time. I don't have time for that. Hey, I'm too busy. Oh, we need to reschedule that. I've got this appointment. I got this meeting. I got that thing going on. Okay. Not realizing the bigger picture, how many times I was saying no, or how often that was happening, or how long it'd been happening. Fitness. What fitness, man? I had ballooned up. I was living on fast food and whatever I could get easy, and I think I'd gained 40 pounds over the course of like 5 years. But it didn't matter as much to me because I was at a point where I felt like I'd finally cracked the code. I'd finally figured out what worked. I'd finally had a taste of success, and I wanted more of it. Right? And so again, friends went by the wayside. So the only thing I was excelling in really was work, and finances, but I was a very, very unbalanced person. And so that's where this concept of the seductiveness of success really comes into play. You got to be careful what you wish for, and you got to be careful what you allow to happen. And I think it takes time and perspective to kind of step out of that to some degree and realize what you've become? Have you really become what you really think is a great version of success? Is your version of success you making $200, $300, $500, $1 million or more a year, but then having no family, or sacrificing your health in the process? Or might it be that you make a lot of money, but you're a person that's grumpy and agitated because you don't ever really have fun and you don't really have a lot of friends because guess what? You don't have the time to pour into them. You don't have the bandwidth to give back to them. That was me, and it almost cost me everything. Okay? It almost cost me my marriage. It almost cost me my relationship with my kids. You know, my kids to this day now are adults, all of them, all four of my boys. My oldest is 29. And then I've got a 28-year-old, and then I've got a 21-year-old, and then a 19-year-old. So all of my kids are grown now, but the two oldest will remark that I was kind of an absentee father when they were kids. Now, I disagree with that because my version of history is different than their version of history. I felt like I made it to every game I could make it to, and I made it to most of them, most of the football games, most of the karate tournaments, most of the practices, those types of things. I did show up, but what they really meant was at home, family time. I wasn't there mentally. I might have been there physically. And even when I was at tournaments and games and things like that, I was there physically, but I was probably only half there mentally because I'm thinking about all the other stuff I've got to do, all the other attributes. And I would use this excuse. Well, look at what I'm doing. Look how much money I'm making, or look how much obligation I have. Hey, listen, I got 70, 75 grand a month. I got to cover, with this radio empire that I had going on. And if I don't do that, everything's going to fall to pieces. All of this is going to go away. And, you never know when it might end. I was always worried. When am I going to get to the bottom of the barrel, the radio barrel? When am I going to exhaust? And ultimately over time, that did end up happening to me. The radio results started to stagnate over time. They started to fall off. I ended up having to add more and more shows to try to capture the same amount of interest because you can only say the same thing over and over again. It wasn't exactly the same thing, but the messaging was very similar. You can only say that multiple times. At some point, you just, you're gonna get to the bottom of the barrel in terms of interest or people that want to hear what you have to say. And so, I think the thing that ended up saving me, I knew I was in a pickle, and it was excruciating. Because the irony of it was just so, profound. Here I wanted to be successful, and I had attained some success. What many would argue was abundant success. But I was miserable. I was not fun to be around. I wasn't happy. I wasn't joyful. I was a shell. I was like a robot. And somebody out there in Radioland can relate. Somebody out there might be going through the exact same thing right now. Okay? And if you are, reach out because I got some advice for you. If you text Greybeard to 84503, just that one word, Greybeard, Greybeard, Greybeard to 84503. Let's connect. I might have some advice for you. I might be able to help you. But for me, what saved me was realizing that I had to get out. I had to end my financial services career. I just had to sell it. I had to get out from underneath of it. And so this prospect of really killing the only thing that I had seen that had produced fruit for me, the only thing that had been successful, the only thing that I'd ever seen that had addressed the first 12 years of my career where it was like unbearably grinding, feast and famine, that cyclical nature of, 100% commission income. Like I was going to get out of it. And my wife, God, I love her. A strong woman is the best thing that you can have as an entrepreneur. A strong woman is essential. You need somebody in your life that can tell you what's up. You need somebody in your life that can tell you what you don't really want to hear, but you really need to hear. And I have that. Okay. And she said to me, I don't know what you're going to do, but if you feel strongly that you need to do this, then you need to do this. Get out. Get out while you can. Because she'd seen what it had done to me. She'd seen what I'd become, And again, if you're not careful, success can ruin your life even more significantly than failure can. And nobody ever talks about that. Nobody ever discusses it. But it's real. And I lived it. And I came close. And so here I am on the other side. I sold that business in 2017. Got out from underneath of it. And it probably took me... Now, I'm not saying that's the answer for everyone. For me at the time, I was tired. I felt like Groundhog's Day. I'd been worn down. I'd pretty much worked 7 days a week for 4 or 5 years. I was just ready. I didn't care what was coming next. I just needed something else to come next, right? So for me, getting out of the business in 2017, it took me 2 years to decompress. It took me 2 years to find me again without the weight of all of that, without the weight of those deadlines, without the weight of the expense and the cost, and without the weight of any of that. It took 2 years for me to become normal, my normal again. I didn't even realize how far I'd fallen or how abnormal I had become to my normal baseline, but it was very, very evident. So my advice to you out in Radio Land, okay, is that you take stock in where you're at right now. What is your definition of success? Is it money? Money at all cost? The only thing that matters is money? Is it wealth? How much what you're worth? For some people, it's income. For others, it's their net worth. Is it net worth? Is it income? Is it influence? Is it faith? Is it your impact in community? Is it your ability is it your friend group? Like you can define success in so many different ways. First question I would have for you is, what is your definition of success? Is it making so much money that you forget your family and end up divorced because, you can't see straight? You don't remember who you were, or is it more well-balanced than that? Would you like to be somebody that is a faith-filled person? For some, maybe. For others, maybe not. But if you're a person of faith, you need to spend time in that faith. You need to foster it with conscious effort. Bible studies, getting together with somebody, prayers, reading, whatever that is. You need to have the time. You need to make the time. I think a well-rounded person is going to be, I think a successful person, in my definition, is going to be somebody that thinks that there's more to them and more to life than just their needs and what they've got going on. So faith is an important part of that. Family. What's the point of success if you're all alone? Like, what's the point of success if your kids hate you? What's the point of success if you're on your second, third, fourth wife or husband? What's the point? Like, is that really what you were going for? Is that what you thought success was as a kid? Is that how you'd want to teach your children about success and their right? Is it fitness? Okay. The more I read on fitness now, and I've transformed my life from a fitness level. Okay. Lost over 40 pounds. My wife and I have enjoyed being consistent on a run, walk, jog streak. I'll tell you this. I'm going to actually do a whole show dedicated on this, talking about sparking your fitness. But, I dedicated myself to do a 30-day challenge, run, walk, or jog 1 mile a day every day in the month of June back in 2016. So June 1st of 2016, I started this challenge that my wife was sponsoring. She had a significant following on Instagram and a lot of runners that followed her. And so she did this, she called it streaking with the cool kids, not naked, streaking like as in a streak, one day after the other. So just 30 days, a streak, right? 30 days. Run, walk, or jog 1 mile a day, every day in the month of June. And so I did that for the very first time. And the consistency of doing that, of thinking about the mile, then changed my desire to eat certain foods, that then changed my desire to then be more consistent on eating better, and then more consistent on lifting weights and doing those types of things. And the more I read is that, the stronger you are heading into your 60s and 70s, the more strength you have in your quads, the more grip strength you have, the longer your longevity. So fitness is a very important thing. I mean, I think it'd be horrible for you to be, worth tens of millions of dollars, but dead at 52 because guess what? You didn't take care of yourself. You missed out on 30 years of additional life because you didn't realize success can be seductive. What about fun? For me, that's the easiest thing for me to give up. And fun is the entree into joy. And I think joy is the truly magical and miraculous emotion. When you really feel joy, it's transformative. Okay? And so having fun, hanging out with your family, having fun, hanging out with your friends. Okay? You can do this habit stacking. Couldn't you do fun and friends? Couldn't you do fun and fitness and friends? Okay. Maybe that's going out to do pickleball. That'd be fun, fitness, and friends. You're hitting all three of those things. But when you think about what your definition of success is it a version of success that doesn't have any fun associated with it? Or would you want to be concentrated on maybe scheduling that and allowing for that and being more present for that? Friends. Man, when you're successful and you're in business, it's the easiest thing to kind of just keep your head down and, hey, don't want to go to Jim's house. Nope, can't make that birthday party. Oh, somebody's retiring. Oh, can't make it. And it's so easy. It's so easy to offer those excuses over time. And next thing you know, the friends stop calling and they stop inviting you. And next thing you know, you stop and realize that you really haven't been out and haven't been around a lot of folks in a lot of time. And I think that's one of the biggest mental health challenges right now. I think COVID for a lot of folks changed things so significantly, changed their friend habits, their friend circles and their friend habits so significantly that a lot of people haven't found their way back again. Okay. And that's an important attribute of, and what I would consider to be a well-rounded, well-balanced, quote-unquote, successful person. Then when it comes to field, yes, it's important to focus on work. Yes, work matters. Yes, you need to make money, But I think that work needs to have its appropriate place in your life. Do you work for a living or do you live to work? Some people live to work, and then some people work to live. Okay? Are you the type that works to live, or are you the type that loves to live to work? Like I was that person that I'd really gotten, just happy as much as I could. I felt very uncomfortable in idle time. I couldn't be comfortable when I was idle or relaxing. I always had to be kind of doing something. I always felt pressure to get things done, pressure to perform, pressure to see radio results, pressure to make money because I had expenses, pressure. So it was easy to ignore many of those other aspects of life. And then finances, what is it all for? Are you trying to leave a legacy? Are you building wealth just so you can, compete with the Joneses? Is it a certain amount of money in the bank account? And what do you do once you get there and you still feel empty? I've talked to a lot of people. I've helped a lot of people. I coached executives. I've coached business owners. And that's kind of like the one missing piece. When people reach their initial or childhood level version of success, they always kind of feel a little melancholic, we'll put it. And the precise reason why is they realize that once they get there, it didn't fill whatever hole. I mean, I was still, up until my mid-40s, trying to prove some guy that I hadn't met or hadn't seen since I was 10, my stepfather. He told me I was never going to amount to anything. I was still in my early to mid-40s before I gave up on those words. That was there, right? It was part of my DNA, right? And it took me a long, long time to overcome that. But here I am on the other side, and here is what I'm offering. If any of this makes sense, I pride myself on being a mentor. I give life advice. I've made a lot of mistakes in my life. I've had a lot of failures. I've had a lot of successes. But I think I've learned a lot from all of that. I've come out the other side, thankful that I now have my health, thankful now that I have a better relationship with my wife than I've ever had, thankful now that I have a better relationship with my kids. And yes, I'm still making money. Yes, I still have business goals. I still have a desire to make an impact and to create wealth for my family. But more importantly than that, I have a desire to come alongside other people that may be struggling, other people that may be in battles that I've fought previously. I know how to wield the sword. I know the strategy to overcome. And if you'd like to connect, feel free to reach out. The easiest way to connect is using your smartphone. If you text Greybeard to 84503, I'll be in touch. It's just a 5-digit, easy number. It's easier than a phone number. But if you text Greybeard to 84503 on your texting app on your smartphone, that'll let me know that you're somebody out there that heard what I said, that doesn't want to be in the same position I had, that doesn't want to, fall victim to the seductiveness of success, because they don't ever tell you that. Not in school, not when you're coming up, not when you're striving, not when you're grinding. They just don't tell you that someday, when you get everything that you wanted, someday when you realize the real fruit of your labor, when you really start to see significant success, it can be so alluring. It can be so something that captivates you fully and completely, that it could cause you to end up losing your life, your family, your kids, those types of things. Nobody wants to be in that position if you can avoid it. So as we close out the show here, one last time, if you'd like to connect, thank you for listening. You can text Greybeard to 84503. I'll be back here same time, same place every week, Saturday at 10 a.m. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next week. Greybeard out. This is The Greybeard Show.
The Greybeard Show. Learn.
Build.
Grow.